again, everybody. Happy New Year. It is December 31st, 2018. Here in New England, the leaves are gone, and it's getting a little crispy. No sight of snow yet, but we'll see what happens at midnight. Well, we look forward to 2019, and with that, I say hello, Patti.
Good morning, Howie.
And how's everything from San Francisco this week?
It's beautiful here today. I think it's about 60 Fahrenheit outside, and just a beautiful day. Looking forward to speaking at an engagement tonight of recovery with my husband. It's going to be an awesome day, awesome evening with some friends.
Oh, that's wonderful. Sounds great. Scoot over to the right just about an inch or so, Patti. That'll be right. Not the other right. There you go. Very nice. And we have a guest today. Introduce our guest. Scoot over just a little more and introduce him.
Yes. Today I have this amazing person that I really need to I'm just so grateful that he's here with us today to talk about his story and his experience of working in the field of addiction and mental health from the downtown east side of Vancouver. We've got Guy Felicella. Did I get it right?
No, you got it wrong.
I got it wrong. Okay, I'll keep working on that.
That's
but
okay.
Guy and I met about 4 months ago through a friend, and he's been really a godsend in my life, and just a real pillar in the community of recovery and helping folks, recover from addiction. And I just like Guy's approach and how he sort of goes in how he kind of, works with folks and meets them where they're at. So anyway, I would like to introduce Guy this morning.
Oh, wonderful. Hello, Guy Felicella, right?
Felicella.
That's correct, Howie.
That'll be Guy. Guy Meatballs and Spaghetti. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
I grew up in an Italian, Greek, Jewish neighborhood, and the ethnic the pronunciations boggled the mind. Anyway, good morning. And where are you based? You're in Vancouver, right?
Yeah, I'm in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and it's today it's a little cold, but at least it's not raining. So,
well, wonderful, and nice to have you here from the great state of cannabis. It's wonderful to have you aboard. I should talk. Massachusetts has turned legal, and it's really something. We were walking. Yeah, my family was here, and I was out. I was about to pick up my son, and driving down Main Street, this huge whiff of pot just wafted its way down the street, and it really made me wonder about, how we're going to deal with this new and rather exciting end of prohibition. And what's interesting is I started watching programs about prohibition and how it was, political motivation, taxes, and all of that, and what the public opinion was versus, what the way the state of affairs were. And now we're revisiting it again with marijuana. But so much for that. So, Guy, tell me, are you an interventionist?
Not specifically. I'm more of a guy that I'm basically an addictions specialist, kind of navigating around harm reduction, recovery, meeting people that are still actively in addiction, and just trying to navigate the best program for them, whether it's through harm reduction interventions or recovery-based interventions.
This would be more like the sobriety coach, recovery coach programs?
Yeah, more of a recovery coaching sort of field. Yeah.
Are you associated with any particular organization?
I work for Vancouver Coastal Health in the downtown east side of Vancouver. So basically, I work with in a harm reduction facility where my personal lived experience in that community kind of plays a huge role in helping people navigate their lives.
Well, while we're having a little bit of audio trouble, we'll let him get.
better.
No, unfortunately, Guy, your audio cut out, but you seem to be back with us now. We lost the last minute of what you said. So you want to rewind a bit? You're good now.
It just says it's coming up poor network connection. Is it okay now?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Yeah, so basically I work for Vancouver Coastal Health in the downtown east side of Vancouver. And it's a harm reduction facility that I work at, basically one that provides opiate replacement therapies to people that are using fentanyl and try to get them stable that way. And, you know, a lot of the people I encountered are people that I'd once used with in the community. And so, you know, they get inspired, I get inspired, and we try to inspire each other to just do better each day.
That's just awesome. I mean, quite frankly, the Suboxone, Subutex thing, the harm reduction philosophy, I'd like to focus on a whole program about that, because there are different philosophies, and when you go to certain meetings, sometimes you'll go to an AA meeting, and they don't want anybody who's on Suboxone, even though they may be living a healthy, otherwise sober life, and their job's great, the family's great, their health is great, they've been straight, you know, not seeking street drugs or anything like that. However, they're on this prescription medication, and some people will not want them as part of the club. So anyway,
Yeah.
it's not a judgmental thing. It's certainly not something I'm asking for your input on right now. But
Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah. I just wanted to also, you know, just really, again, reach out to, just to kind of acknowledge Guy and the work that he is doing in the downtown east side, because, you know, as we all know, that the whole fentanyl is kind of like the new crack cocaine. And, you know, people continue to use, fentanyl like it was crack cocaine, like a lot of people used back in the early 90s, just because you have to ingest it, you know, so many different times throughout the day. You know, every couple hours people are injecting fentanyl. And Guy is really right in the middle of the epidemic that's happening in the downtown east side. And, you know, with the folks that Guy has probably seen a lot of people or heard of a lot or been around a lot of people that have overdosed, and worked with a lot of folks, you know, with those stats that are out there in the last couple of years. So I have a great appreciation for harm reduction, and really, and I'm glad to hear you, Howie, talk about, you know, really wanting to dedicate a show to harm reduction, just because that is the reality of what we're looking at. So I wanted to really kind of ask Guy and to maybe elaborate a little bit on what his thoughts are as far as the folks that he works with that are in active addiction, you know, because most of the people that you and I work with, Howie, are either in recovery or working on, you know, getting into recovery. So Guy, I'm just kind of curious about you and what your perspective is in dealing with the folks that are out there in active addiction.
Yeah. For me, it's, you know, people that, you know, we don't deal with a heroin crisis anymore. Heroin's doesn't exist in Vancouver anymore. It's now all fentanyl. And so the approach has to change. Maybe addiction hasn't changed in 2,000 years, but the drugs sure have. And this is an extremely powerful opiate that kills people on first-time use. And so for me, when I see somebody with, you know, that's been using and multiple overdoses in a year, and it's not, I'm telling you, I've seen people come into my clinic, and it's not like out of the ordinary for people to overdose maybe 30 to 40 times a year. And that's being brought back to life. And so naturally for them to even, and the withdrawal is just tremendous. It's horrifying. When I watch somebody withdraw, I say to myself, man, you know, I never got to experience it like this. Withdrawal is withdrawal, but this is just an extreme level of it. And so a lot a lot of times for me, it's basically what I've always stated is you can't save a dead addict. And basically if somebody's already gone, then there's no work to be done with that person. And so for me, it's if I can get somebody stable on an opiate replacement therapy to move forward in their life, I'm all for it. I mean, I have an expectation on my life, but on other people's, that's their expectation. And unfortunately, like you guys said at the top of your show, you're right. The culture and the stigma that exists in not only society but also in the recovery sectors is actually probably, in my opinion, a big part of why this overdose crisis is the way it is today. And so naturally, moving forward, if that culture doesn't change, people aren't going to want to show up at the meetings of AA or NA because of the stigma that exists around it. And so for me, that's one of the hardest things to do, is to try to, make people understand that unfortunately some people do exist like that in recovery, but not all. And so you just have to try to find the right people.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing that I was really interested in to hear you say, you were also talking about the interventions that you facilitate in the downtown east side and working at the facility that you work. And I mean, it's interesting as Howie and I are, interventionists that work with families and work with, trying to get folks into some form of, inpatient treatment, really most of the time, and working with families. But I mean, it's so interesting to hear your experience in terms of the interventions that you facilitate with the folks that you're working with. So who are some of the folks that you work with in terms of helping you to navigate folks that are in active addiction, that are moving into, whatever that might be, whether it's Suboxone, methadone, housing? I'm just curious about how you work together as a team to try and help some of those folks.
Yeah, well, I mean, luckily for me, maybe it's not so much luck, but being a person that was in addiction for 30 years and 20 of it in the downtown east side, and actually using all the resources that exist, I've actually know a lot of people. So with that, I can navigate through the services that best suits the individual. And for me, for somebody that's you build a rapport with people, I think is the biggest impact that you can have in somebody's life, and treating them like they're human beings. And I think sometimes in humanity we lose sight of that's another human being that's struggling. And with addiction, I always try to find out what's the story behind it. And once I've attached the story to the individual, then I can start getting a better picture of what's going to possibly work for this individual. And a lot of people too, when they get out of the cycle of using, they need to have that safety net. Not all, but some do need to have that safety net of going on a Suboxone, to actually try new things, because I think the fear of them changing anything is so dramatic, and what their life will look like without drugs. It becomes one of those things that gives them at least I'll have this, that I can go and do it, and the fear level is still there, but it's not as dramatic.
It's interesting. You've touched on a number of things. First, and probably the most poignant, when you are in the field, you know the racetrack, you know the moves, you know where people are going to do their hole shots and where they're going to be holed up. It's kind of a goofy analogy, but you know that in your area. So you're uniquely qualified. Not only were you involved yourself, but you were involved there in that territory. That's your neighborhood. So there's an added value to your talent. Somebody like me in my mid-60s who lives on the East Coast, I wouldn't be anywhere near as effective as you. My drug use back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s is very different and the kind of things I was involved in. So considering the epidemic that you're referring to, this fentanyl thing, hallelujah, brother. I mean, you are it. We got other shit out there. There's no two ways about it. But, dude, your dance is awesome. You know the dance. That's what I mean to say. You've really... and so I just want to, as folks are listening, those of us that want to help need to find the area that we're best suited to help. And go to that. Run to your strengths. Now, you also touched on another thing, the stigma. And it's funny. Years ago, I went to an AA meeting here where I live and saw everybody I knew. And everybody joked about how everybody knows everybody. And there's no anonymity. Animosity. Anonymity.
See, I can say that, but I can't say fettuccine.
So there's no animosity in AA.
Okay, got it.
Anonymity in AA. And I rephrased it. I said, oh, this should be called Alcoholics Unanimous. Instead of anonymous. It's because we are all there for this similar, unanimous reason, but there was no anonymity. Everybody knew everybody. And I thought, why not? What's wrong with that? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We talk about the opposite of addiction is connection. Well, that's what these AA and NA groups do. They allow you to connect. There's no anonymity within that group. They all know each other and support each other. And what's wrong with shouting it to the mountain? I mean, after all, who isn't proud of themselves when they get sober? Who isn't more proud than a mother or father of their child who comes out the other side and now is working well and loving well and living well? Hallelujah. Why not shout it to the mountain? Why do we need to recoil in shame that we went through it? There's no shame in going through it.
Yeah.
My mother's 92, and she says there's no shame in having bugs. There's shame in keeping them. And so the idea, you have bugs, that's one thing. Fix it. And so when people fix it, celebrate it. And so that's what I would like. And we'll talk more about that. And when Guy comes back, maybe he'll have more to say about that. The extreme withdrawals. Patti, this is really interesting. One of the reasons why I stopped doing cocaine was that horrific cannonball feeling in my chest. That feeling of withdrawal. That was so severe. And for me, that was one of the major reasons why I ran in the other direction. If I could imbue that in other people, they would never touch it. Now, what Guy was talking about, his experience watching people go through fentanyl withdrawal, which is just insanely difficult. I'm like, gee, I have no problem showing a video to kids about people who are in the throngs of fentanyl withdrawal. And Guy, I was telling Patti how I have no problem showing kids videos of people going through withdrawal, because everything in media puts the shiny side, the nice side, the fun side. They don't show the hangovers. They don't show the puking, the grotesque end of it. We all make fun of it. People bowing down to the porcelain god, and we all laughing about it. Ha, ha, ha. It's lots of fun. Yeah, no, it isn't. It sucks. Yeah. And then for you talking about people going through fentanyl withdrawal, I mean, the thing is, most people who are listening to the show have no idea what you're talking about. I mean, I know what heroin feels like, but I don't know what fentanyl feels like. I'm 64. I mean, my days came and went before fentanyl got here. But holy crap. So what do you think of that? What do you think the impact would be if there were kiosks downtown at bus stops showing little minute-long vignettes of people in the throngs of an active withdrawal? do you think it would have an input at all, an effect?
Yeah, it's debatable. I mean, it's a good question. Um, for some, it might impact them. You know what? I find that, so I do talks in school systems in British Columbia. And when I'm doing the talks and describing what addiction, what I went through, I've had many, and not just some, but many students come up to me with tears in their eyes.
Well, we've lost Guy again, but I know what he's talking about. And when he comes back, be a little patient with him. Let's see if you can see me go like this. He probably can't see. But, Patti, do you remember the scratch and sniff? Guy, we lost everything you said. But do you guys remember the scratch and sniff movies? I forget which one, where they give you a card, and when you go to the movie theater, they'll come to a scene and there'll be a number, and you have to scratch off that number, and you smell the smell.
No, I don't remember that.
Oh, I've got to remember the name of the movie. So he walked through a rose garden, and you scratch number 6, and you smell roses. Mm-hmm. And then he walked into a dog pound, and you scratch the sniff, and you smell dog poop.
Nope, don't remember that one either.
Okay.
Never smelled dog poop.
Okay.
I remember the scratch and sniff stickers.
Okay, Guy, here's my idea. Here's my idea. Guy, I want you to find a place that makes scratch and sniff cards. And you're going to have puke. You're going to have vomit. Then you're going to have, let's just say, normal bowel movement. Then you're going to have bad bowel movement. And then you're going to have withdrawal bowel movement. All three. Yes. They'll all stink. But if you know what I'm talking about, I worked in the ER for 10 years. There's a big difference in how repulsive your internal system gets when you get sicker and sicker. And so as you're talking to these kids, you can put roses up on the screen. Scratch number 1. Ah, roses, yum. And chocolate, number 2, scratch chocolate. Well, this is what happens if you eat bad Mexican. Scratch 3.
Right.
And then you talk about, the substances and withdrawal. And you go, now, scratch number 12. And then you'll have teachers throwing up and things like that. And it'd be so much fun.
Well, I was just thinking about the whole withdrawal thing because, as an interventionist, addiction and recovery specialist, one of the most important things that I focus on when I'm actually at an intervention is what is the drug of choice that the person is coming off. Because we all say it doesn't matter what drug you use, when a person is ready to accept recovery. And when the commonality of folks coming together from addiction to recovery, it doesn't really matter what kind of drug you're using. However, when a person is in active addiction and they are using, for instance, heroin, opiates, fentanyl, whatever that may be, my focus is really trying to assess that situation because I know, just because I'm in recovery myself, what it was like for me when I actually came off heroin, when I came off methadone. I was on methadone, just so you know, for many years prior to getting clean, in 1991. And I really would like to focus on writing a book at some point and really focusing on the whole harm reduction of my life, because there's so many experiences that I went through that I can relate to folks when they are in that place, when I'm sitting at an intervention and I know that they are freaking out because they're using Valium, they're using some type of downer, they're using some type of opiate, whether it's fentanyl, heroin, those are really important aspects to try and connect and meet that person that's active in active addiction. So I think that, with Guy, in some of the things that he's described, is that he really does meet folks where they're at. And I have a great appreciation for that, because one of the other great things that he said that I really liked and I wrote down, which I'm definitely going to use, what's the story behind a person? When I find out what the story is behind that person, I'm able to meet them where they're at. I can move out of judgment. I can move out of not trying to dictate what their traditional treatment plan is going to be. What is the treatment plan going to be for that individual? And that's what I got out of, some of the things that Guy was talking about. So Guy, when you meet with someone, and you're looking at so many different stories, so many different traumas that people have gone through, whether they are in active addiction or from their childhood, what are some of the treatment plans that you sort of intuitively, not traditionally, intuitively come to put into action for some of the folks that you work with?
Yeah, well, obviously, when I find out, you have a 15-year-old client that's been, sexually abused for 10 years of her life, right away, I understand that, that's extremely painful. I understand pain, maybe not pain to that kind of circumstance, but however, and just seeing the tears that come down people's faces. And basically what I do is, I basically ask them, get to know them so well as just as a human being, and treat them like a human being. What that does is that opens the door for them to know that, hey, it's a safe place for me to go to Guy. And when they do come, and believe me, lots do, then we can start the conversation about what recovery could look like, what their life could look like. And a lot of it is just building that human connection. And I've always said it, is that human connection changes the direction of somebody's life.
That's actually a perfect place to pause. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
That describes my efforts.
No, that's not it.
The views and opinions expressed on this show are of the hosts, the guests, and callers. They do not necessarily reflect the views of Addiction Got a Minute or the organizations associated with them.
Okay, clearly we're back. I've yet to master this system. I don't know why. I can't hit this and get that going, but we'll figure that out at another time. We are back with Patti Pike, my co-host, who's down in San Francisco today, and our guest is Guy Felicella from GuyFelicella.com, and that would be GuyFelicella.com.
Correct.
Excellent. So if you folks would like to get in touch with Guy, and we'll repeat that towards the end. So now we're talking about the other side. Once you get somebody's attention, how do you keep their attention, motivate them into action? I mean, that's what Patti and I tend to focus on doing. It's the motivating them to see sanity again. And by the way, I like to use the term sanity versus sobriety, because within the world that we live, you have to think sanely, you have to think logically, you have to return to sanity, because the world of being addicted is truly insane. And so it's on the other side of that we get healthy. So are there long-term treatment facilities that you prefer or that you're aware of, Guy? Are there places that you've sent folks that have been successful?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I've sent people to. It's funny. Depending on the right opportunity, the right moment, and the right time for the individual. I mean, I've sent many people to treatment facilities where they've gone away for 3 months, and then I have one guy that's actually still in treatment, and it's a great place in Surrey, um, which is I don't know if I guess I could say it's
Of course.
Phoenix Center.
What is it?
It's called Phoenix Center, and it's in Surrey. And so what they do is they have a tremendous recovery program there, but it's after that, I think the part that's really important is the continuum of care that exists there.
Bang!
And that's the. I don't care if a treatment facility success rate says they're 86.6% success. I always say, yeah, big deal. What happens to the individuals after treatment?
Guy, you just earned my respect. I'm telling you, I'm going to have a Groucho Marx duck that comes down whenever anybody says post-treatment aftercare. Say the magic word, duck comes down, give you $50. I'm telling you, pal, really, you have hit my hot button, because all the work we do, all the sacrifice, everything that everybody does involving the client goes to shit when they come back and they jump right back into the cesspool they were at. No continuum of care, no custody of care, nothing like that. So that's wonderful. How do you keep the ball rolling where you are?
Yeah, I've had one.
That's really too bad. I'm trying to give Guy the high sign. Don't worry, I'll cut this out in post.
Okay. Yeah. So, I really like, obviously the continuum of care is what really my whole 2019 is going to be really focused on. Just because I think that there's so much emphasis that's put onto the fact of getting people in recovery, abstinent, whatever traditional way that is. It is the best, and it is the best way to, get clean and sober. It is absolutely 100%. Abstinent is a great feeling. I know that. However, we've got so many folks that is not going to be their experience, and I think that, my whole theory is that if someone is in recovery in an abstinent model treatment program, and when they leave treatment, I think that there needs to be such a greater focus on the continuum of care, as Guy was mentioning. And I know just from working and living in Vancouver for many years and working in a downtown east side, exactly where Guy works. And I know what it's like to work with folks that were HIV, AIDS, completely to the place of not willing to stop using drugs, but they are willing to not want to continue to live on the street. They want to get into a housing program. They want to maybe, get on disability, so they can have food in the refrigerator, so they can get up in the morning from the same bed. Whatever way a person wants to recover, is it complete? Does it have to be all about, inpatient treatment? And where I'm kind of going to with this, Guy. We've had a lot of conversations about that.
Well, let me take the ball from here. And Guy, unfortunately, you cut out again. So I want you to think about what you just said, and I would love to hear it. As you're thinking about that, I've had a really interesting number of successes with people who did not go to treatment after detox, but had already made up their mind. They were there. Now, I know that there were institutions that wanted to either incarcerate them or get them into treatment. But for whatever reason, it didn't happen. So I saw them through my counseling services twice a week, keeping them focused. And both of the people that I'm referring to, it's been over a year now, we're good. They're good. So all I can say is it's about your heart. It's about making that decision. And when you've made that decision, if you're in an environment like a treatment center, that's wonderful. But it's not 100% necessary. Now, Guy, can you recall what it was that you were talking about a minute ago?
The continuum of care.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so with the treatment facilities that exist, I navigate around ones that have that continuum of care. And it's really important for the continuum of care to exist, that people, after they complete treatment, that they have a place to go. Because, listen, we are the people that needs to bring hope to the people that are struggling. They don't have hope. We have to bring it. And if we show up with the hope and the belief that any person at any time can change. And that's just been, I changed. Other people can change. And so I've seen it in the lives of others, is that when you bring the hope to the individual, they feel it. And how do they feel it? It's because you care. And you care with a non-judgmental approach about the human life that exists. And maybe you care because you went through it yourself. But it's powerful. And that connection with an individual can light them on fire to where they want to make a difference. And I've seen it happen countless times. And so, unfortunately, in a lot of these treatment facilities that exist, the continuum of care afterwards is a shelter in the downtown east side. And how ridiculous is that? Why would people even want to go to treatment when they're not going to have housing when they're finished? And so people are so stuck in this hopeless sense of reality for them because it's real. And so if you don't address the housing issue, you're never going to look at the addiction issue, because people aren't going to go back to the same crap that they've just left to go do treatment for 3 months to come back to the same environment. And until that changes, and especially in the time frame of addiction that we're dealing with now, people aren't going to live 30 or 20 years in addiction anymore. They're going to live 5. And so naturally, even in the United States, with the amount of the overdose crisis and the 72,000 people that died last year alone, it's because the system that exists in the United States doesn't recommend a harm reduction approach to some individuals. And so until that changes, sadly, the U.S. is going to struggle with this epidemic for much longer than it needs to.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, you touched on another of my hot buttons, and I am going to refer to Senator Michael Moore, who has a phenomenal effort moving forward to implement change in the recovery program. I have had this idea, and it's a co-housing type of environment where you've got this group of structures, nice little houses, in all these towns. Now, when you come back from recovery, from wherever you are, instead of going home, back to your connections and triggers, you go away from home to another one of these co-housing recovery centers. And everybody there is in recovery. There are counselors that are a resident. People work at sober environments. It's a healthy, you get health care, you get your driver's license back, you get, spiritual counseling, all of that. But the thing is, it's the post-discharge aftercare lifestyle. So you live with people who are continuing the I'm moving on. I'm moving up, So it's something that I'm working on, and the idea is for it to be funded by big pharma and tobacco. I know it's a hell of a dream. And I know at first blush, people say that's crazy. I go, yep, it is. Well, so was the steam locomotive back then. So let's see, small steps. We don't have too much time left. Guy, is there anything on your mind that you want to share while you're with us? You got to bug out of here in about 10 minutes, right?
Yeah, I just, I just, want people to understand with harm reduction. We've actually been doing harm reduction since the beginning of time. If you think about it, if you eat too many hamburgers and you gain too much weight, then you reduce the harm that you cause to yourself. You start to go to the gym with all these things with New Year's resolutions. So that come up, and we try to better ourselves. This is all reducing the harm that we're causing only to ourselves or to the environment, or so we do these things. So harm reduction has actually existed since the beginning.
Yep.
And so what I caution society is that if we don't become more open to it and more welcoming into it, the unfortunate part is that a lot more people are going to lose their lives because of the way the stigma and the culture that exists around it. And until we start to really change that aspect of it, because the drugs are extremely powerful, and I've seen it, first-time experimental use can now result in death, and that's tragic. And so if a kid picks up a Xanax pill and he thinks it's Xanax and all of a sudden it's fentanyl and dies, those are the things that we need to look at to make the system better. And the continuum of care, like we talked about, I think that's that's the piece that's missing.
Before we say goodbye to you, I've got one thing I want to get your input on. There's been talk about the pros and cons of naltrexone. The pros and cons? What do you mean cons? Well, I mean, the pro, of course, is that it completely neutralizes the effects and brings somebody back to life right away. The con is, and I've seen it myself, right in the ER, they sit straight up and they're furious that you killed their buzz. They run out AMA, and I mean run, right back into the rain, right out into the cold. 2 hours later, another overdose. Now, we've heard of things like that, but I've seen it myself. So now the question is, are people getting more bold, knowing that they've got naltrexone on them? So if they do go too far, they'll be saved? What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I really don't believe so. I don't believe people are out there trying to kill themselves, and it's evident in what I see every day. Like a lot of the times, people use outside direct. People always come by the downtown east side and they'll say, "Look at these people; they're using out on the street." And I would say to them, I'd say, "Yeah, you know what that is." And the reason why I used out on the street is because I didn't want to die, and because it's the tainted drug supply that exists. I mean, this is just crippling people. I mean, it's not even, it's synthetic and it's imported from China. And until all this stuff really starts to get looked at from the top officials' perspective, they start to change the structure of how drugs are brought into the system, because I've watched it wipe out hundreds and hundreds of people. I've not only watched hundreds of people die when I was in addiction, but I've watched hundreds and hundreds of people that I've built a rapport with over the years, that they finally lose their lives to this. And I tell you, in numerous conversations, we just lost a young girl that was 24 a couple of weeks ago, and that I worked with her extensively for about a year, and she had a child, and she kept trying. She kept trying to go into recovery. She wanted to go, and guess what? She didn't want to die, and so naturally now she's no longer here. And the sad part is that she has a daughter that she was just trying so hard to get back into her life. And this tragic story exists throughout the world. It's not just one thing. It's so many people are struggling with it, and they don't want to die. But what they can't realize is that they're dealing with this emotional pain. And until there's some sort of spiritual connection that changes people's hearts, and changing people's hearts through spiritual connection is have some compassion and empathy, because if you bring that to the doorstep, I'm telling you, people are going to get better. And this girl didn't want to kill herself, and neither does anybody else that's on the street there. And it's just one of those things where they continue to use because the pain is so unbearable of what they're dealing with. So until we deal with the pain, and get that and help them with that, then they'll possibly stop using.
I mean, how can you fight that? You can't. There's nothing competitive about that. There's nothing political about that. That's the heart. And as an interventionist, that's really where I try and hit people, is in the heart. And it took me I knew that I was practicing that when I was working in the downtown east side, but it was very difficult for me to articulate. So I do appreciate you, Guy, and the work that you're doing. And I just sort of wrote down a lot of things, which I usually do, because this is going to be part of my book one day. But, one of the things that I bring to the folks that are listening, look for the story behind the person. Hit them in the heart. Believe in them. It is important for any addict to have someone to say to them, I believe in you. Because if you don't have anyone that believes in you, then you are in a hopeless state. And if you're in a hopeless state, that is not a good place for not just an using act, not for an active addict, but also for a family member. Or when a family member is struggling with someone that's in active addiction and they are in a hopeless state, they will then go into a place of a very dark place. So it's very important for family members to also stay into a hopeful place. And that is why it's so important for families to get professional help, that you cannot treat your family member. You need to have professionals like all the three of us. So anyway, that's what I want to, to say. Again, thank you, Guy, for just being you, being the person that you are. You have a calling, and I sense that, I feel it, and just keep moving forward with that.
Again, I'll just kudos to Patti for bringing those points up. Guy, you are an angel, and I want you to remember that. One of the weirdest things about what I do, when a mother comes to me and crying and says, no, you don't understand. They found my son at 3 a.m. It was 20 below. He didn't have a shirt on. This is the life he was living. If you didn't help him, he would have been out there again. And if they didn't find him the next time, it'd be all over. And that you saved his life. And after 3 or 4 mothers say that to you, you start to appreciate the value of what you do. So you are an angel, and God bless you. How can I know I just said your website, but please tell folks how they can reach you.
They can reach me through the website at guyfelicella.com. I'm also on, I have a consulting page on Facebook, so they can go to that as well, and you can see events that I do. And
great. Spell your name for us.
It's Guy, Guy, last name F as in Frank, Elicella. That's my first and last name, and if you just go on Facebook, Guy Felicella Consulting, it'll pop up, and then my website just explains what I do for my consulting company.
Perfect, very good. Thank you again, Guy. And Patti, how can people reach you?
www.canninterventions.com. 415-827-3725. And I also do a lot of work both in Canada and the United States.
Hey.
And mine is bananas, BANANNANNANN. No, it's Howie Marlin, HOWIEMARLIN.com. We'll get you to the website. For all that and more, please leave your suggestions, your comments, please, good, better, and different. I don't care. If there's anyone that you folks who are listening to this feel we should have on the show, please do drop their name. Ask them to give me a call, 508-687-0068, 508-687-0068. My practice here on Martha's Vineyard is for post-treatment family and life skills counseling here on the island, but also doing addiction intervention services as well. So any other shout-outs? Any shout-outs you want to share with us, Guy? Say hi to anybody.
Yeah, sure. First, well, obviously, I'd like to give a shout out to my wife, her name's Brianne, and who's been a massive support not only in my life, but in my journey as well. And then to all the people that work in the downtown East Side, here's a shout out to you guys that the work you're doing, you're saving lives, and I know sometimes it's hard on us, but we gotta keep pushing and keep moving.
Hallelujah to that, brother. And Patty, any shout outs from you?
Yeah, I want to shout out to my friend Mark Rose up in Seattle.
Mark!
Yay! I know. I talked to Mark a couple of times in the last couple of days, and he's been very helpful in some of the cases that I'm working on right now. So I just want to shout out to Mark.
Well, on that, I'll say Happy New Year's, everybody, and we will see you next time.
I've got a saying that describes my efforts.
Happy New Year.
The best I can
Happy
do
New
is the
Year.
best I can do. And I will. This brings us to the end of another episode of Addiction. Got a minute? I wish you warm breezes and clear sailing. Till next time, I'm Howie Marlin.